Okay, so this is an issue that, like, I think the left and the right should agree on, and I think they did in the state of Maine in 2017. And what they did was they passed a constitutional amendment to give you more freedom for food and, give farmers the ability to sell what they, make. And apparently, up in Canada, they, like, the government went in and, like, culled a whole bunch of ostriches for, like, no reason, you know? And, like, ostriches are good, I think, for more than one purpose. I forget. But, in agriculture or whatever. But the government just they had no reason to do it, and they just did it. And it's almost like they just have a war on, like, food independence, because that's kind of what, like, the people in Maine were about. The idea that, like, we can raise our own food, we don't have to buy from these mega corporations, you know. And you would think people on the left would be happy with that. You would think, but because of this whole rural urban divide, um, we have a problem with that. But it really needs to come together and, like, on something like this. And nothing scares the big bad boys more than that. That's really what needs to happen. Like, you can yell libtard, you can yell fascist, all day long, and they love it. But if people come together on, like, something like food freedom, like, instead of Bill Gates deciding what you should eat, you know, why not we decide what we should eat? After all, I'm basically literally at the end of the Oregon Trail. If you play that game, that's where I live, right there when you arrive, pretty much. And it's kind of like the promised land in terms of agriculture. It's very fertile land. Um, there's lots of farms everywhere, and yeah, we have cattle and stuff like that. And you don't have to drive far to see cows and stuff like orchards and things. And it just seems like that's something we should come together on and just ignore the politicians. Like, this wasn't about politics left or right. This was I think, a voter referendum or something that did it, and it changed their constitution. I don't know how Maine works, but this article doesn't mention constitution. But I knew when it happened, it did mention constitution in the articles. So, yeah, make this a firm, hard no on telling us where we can buy our food. You know, and if they say, like, "Oh, you'll get sick," I mean, give me a break. How much stuff have you got for the grocery store that was like? I mean, I've gotten stuff that, like, made me feel like such crap after I ate it. Um, we've had, like, chicken recalls from, like, chicken nuggets that have, like, metal in them and stuff from the machinery. I mean, give me a break. There's no safety being protected. Um, it's control of one of the most important things you need: food. You know, you need food, water, shelter, right? Or you know, you need all those three. You know, so yeah, and that's a whole nother. Those are two other topics, but this one's about food and about the ostriches in Canada that were basically just they culled the whole, like, flock. I don't know what you call it. Like, all of them, they just got rid of them, and, like, no one got to eat them. No one, because I've had ostrich. It's good. It tastes really good. It's, like, better than chicken, that's for sure. Like, in a burger, I had one once. Yeah, really nice. So yeah, I don't know what they did that for, other than to just mess with rural people. Um, and just you know give them something to be angry about. But that's why I'm making this video, because this is, like, the way to go. Instead of, like, yelling and screaming about the ostriches, which is obviously a bad thing that happened, obviously, um, focus on food freedom. You know, advocate for that. Um, let them wheel out the libtards that. I mean, how many of them are left that do that? It's like, how many people still support T Man? I'm not allowed to say his name in the house. My better half, she won't let me. She just says, "I don't want to hear his name. Stop it." So I have to call him T Man. Anyway, um, it's funny, but this should be a cause we can all agree on, and in very different ways, in very different places. Locally, wherever you are. Um, just spread the word. Talk about it. Coffee shop talk. Just if you're at the grocery store standing in line and it's like, why can't we just buy real meat? Just say that to somebody. And like, what do you mean it's real meat? I'm like, no, this isn't real. Look, they got food dyes in it and this and that. Just say stuff like that. Because I'm telling you, if you buy real meat, it doesn't look like the stuff at the grocery store. Like they put dyes in it, and it just looks weird. And I think they put stuff in it to make you eat more of it. Because when I eat meat from like local sources that are not processed or whatever, they're just like basically butchered. Uh, I I don't eat as much of it, and like it's boring to eat, but it doesn't have that like tasty effect. But you feel nourished, and you feel better, and you don't have indigestion. So yeah. So I thought I'd turn a negative into a positive because what happened up there in BC was awful with them ostriches. But let's just talk about this with your, because they pulled it off in Maine, and the internet's constantly telling you can't do anything. Well, they did there. In fact, in 2017, that the time that about around that time in my town, you could get eggs by just driving down the street, and people would sell them out of their front yard. Yeah, and I even had a friend who I set up a CB radio in his car just because he didn't know how to do it, and I checked the antenna and tuned it and everything. And for like the next, I don't know, 6 months while he still lived here, he'd periodically just come over with like 4 dozen eggs. Like there'd be feathers in the cartons and stuff. And he just said, "Save the cartons, save the cartons," because he needed the cartons. It's like, if you buy eggs, save those cartons. He's like, "I want those." So he'd give me eggs, and all I had to give him was cartons. Pretty funny. That all ended, of course. Now eggs are like gold, but you know, they're still pretty expensive. They're getting better, but in any case, we should advocate for food freedom. Try to support local farmers if you can. I know if you don't live somewhere where you're close to one, you know, that might be a problem, but try to like think about that, talk about that, get that out there. And because this is like sovereignty, this is like individual sovereignty and freedom, and this should not be a left or right issue in any sense or form, even if they set up those goddamn government grocery stores in New York or whatever. It'd be funny to see it happen. Okay, I have to admit, I almost want it to happen to see what, like, just to see what you get. What's the haul? The government grocery store. It could be good if they did it right. Especially if they use local farms and stuff. Um, but anyway, that's something I put out here about this topic because it's an important topic, and it really should not be left or right. So talk about it, whatever you can, just make that in the consciousness of people.